Welcome back to Real Mummy, where we uncover the hidden gems of motherhood. I'm your host, Lucy Dalton, and today we're talking about liquid gold. Yep, we're diving deep into the world of breastfeeding with the insightful and inspiring breastfeeding counsellor, Leah. Leah's journey is a roller coaster of challenges and triumphs, filled with tips and stories that will resonate with every mum. Whether you're just starting your breastfeeding journey or looking for expert advice to keep going strong, Leah's experiences will empower and enlighten you. So if you're ready to discover the secrets of breastfeeding success and the magic of mother's milk, keep listening. This episode is packed with gold nuggets you won't want to miss.
You are a mum with two kids, and you have been, we worked this out, you've been feeding for what, probably like on and off for 3 years, last 3 years.
Yeah, literally, I only stopped for around 6 or 7 months when I was pregnant with my second, for various reasons. But I feel like I've virtually been constantly breastfeeding for the last three years.
I know, and it's such a hard thing to do. Like it's a job. It's like a full-time job.
Absolutely.
So that's why I was so passionate about having you on, because I'm like, you're a mum, but you're also obviously a physio with like lactation, like interest and things like that. So I was like, perfect. You're like tick, 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 like let's get you on. So what I say first thing, so these are all the kind of questions mums have been asking me. So I was like, right. So how early can mums start pumping or expressing after they've had a baby?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. The answer to that would really be just as early as needed or required. So within the first hour after giving birth, most mums will generally try to attach the baby directly to the breast because that's the best way to try and remove milk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Babies, they're born with an innate reflex to find the breast, to attach, and to start sucking. However, for many different reasons, like some mums will need to express milk immediately or in the early hours following birth, and that's completely fine. So it's never too early if needed to start expressing. One of the things to think about if that is you is that in that first few days after birth, colostrum is all that the breast will produce until the mum's milk supply will come in. So that can obviously happen anywhere between like day 2 to day 6. So colostrum is basically where that term liquid gold that you used
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
comes from because yeah, it's yellow, it's gold, it's thick, it's full of concentrated
Mm-hmm.
proteins, vital immune factors. It has such incredible benefits for a baby. So that is all that your breasts will produce in those first few days. And most mums, they'll only be able to express a small amount. So with each feed, you're looking at maybe only half a teaspoon in that first few days. And that is all the baby needs in those first few days. Because babies' stomachs are only about the size of a small marble.
What, when
So
they're
they can
first
only hold a
born?
small amount.
That is
So I think a lot of
mental.
people are surprised to hear that, right? Because that's so small, like one of those tiny little small marbles. That's all that the baby needs.
That's mental.
And because, because colostrum is so thick and it's small in volume, it can be more effective to hand express rather than pump in that
Mm-hmm.
first day or so. Um, because even if you try and use a pump, you're only just going to probably get a couple of mils.
Yeah.
When the milk starts to change from yellow to white, it will then start to increase a lot in volume. And that's when mums might like to start introducing a pump. So
Is that when they
never too
say like
early to express.
your milks come in? Is that like, you hear them say like, oh, your milks come in?
That's right. Yep. So when you start to see that change from colostrum to, it becomes a little bit more of a clearer sort of watery color
Mm-hmm.
at first, and then it becomes more looking like milk. And that's when the milk comes in. And for most mums, anywhere between 2 to 6 days after birth, generally.
Okay. Wow. And so what kind of situations for mums who might want to use a pump, can anyone use them, or is there certain situations?
Yeah. I mean, in chatting to mums that I know, any mum that's had to pump has done it for all sorts of different reasons. So, in the early days after birth, it might be if the mother is separated from the baby, like for example, the baby's in NICU or special care nursery. Um, if the baby's born with like medical conditions. So
Mm-hmm.
um, things like, um, you know, cleft lips or palates, or they've been, struggling to attach, they're having problems with sucking. Some premature babies obviously haven't developed that sucking reflex. So that's when mothers might need to pump early on to try and build up their supply. Later on down the track, mums might need to pump to rest painful, damaged nipples. And that was certainly me when
Yeah.
feeding my first baby. Um, you know, the first week to 2 weeks, every feed was agonizingly painful because she wasn't latching well.
Yeah.
I was almost in tears when I had to try and get her to breastfeed. And a good friend of mine actually said, "Did you want to just borrow my breast pump and just
Yeah.
give that a go? And maybe just give your nipples like a break." And so it's like, oh, I'll give it a go. Didn't really know what I was doing, but I remember when I put the breast pump on and being able to remove milk that wasn't painful, I just was like tears of joy. Like it was just such a huge weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
Um, to know, okay, I still can feed my baby and
Yeah.
not be in agony
Yeah.
and give my body the time to heal.
Yeah.
And, I only think I had to pump maybe like 1 or 2 days,
Yeah.
and my breasts felt better, my nipples healed, and then I got the baby back onto the breast. So, you know, that's a really good situation, I think, where pumps can be super useful as well. And then of course, like when I went back to work,
Mm-hmm.
I was expressing at work. So then I could, give my baby breast milk still. So yeah, any mums who are returning to work or study would certainly want to consider pumping if they want to keep breastfeeding. Um, they'd be sort of more of the common reasons.
Yeah. And I think a lot
Um,
of workplaces are good
the
when it comes
other,
to pumping, isn't it now? Like
yeah,
feeding and things like that. They do kind of encourage it nowadays, because women are going back to work, and it's
yeah,
not kind of a taboo thing as much as it used to be.
absolutely. Um, the other thing in regards to pumping, and something to just sort of keep in mind if you are maybe pregnant or looking ahead and going, right, I want to breastfeed, and looking at sort of videos and things and ways to do it. There's a lot out there on social media about pumping, and there's videos of women who are videoing themselves expressing milk, pumping milk, and they're showing this massive freezer stash that they've got of all
Mm-hmm.
this milk. And I remember looking at that when I was pregnant before I had my first and going, oh, that's what I have to do. Like, I've just got to get a pump, and I've got to be building up this stash because, like, what if my milk just suddenly dries up and
Yeah.
I have no milk to feed my baby? So that's actually not true. Like, it's not really how breastfeeding works. And, there's no need to actually build up a milk stash
Mm-hmm.
unless, there might be very, very slight reasons that you might need to do that. But generally, most women do not need to have a big freezer stock full of milk. Um, so yeah, that's just something to have in mind.
Do you know that that's
Don't be
so funny,
fooled by
because
social media.
I was the exact same by that. And that's the only reason I started pumping with my second. Like, I never even pumped with my first. And then with my second, I was breastfeeding so well. I never had any issues with like the nipple pain, like everything. She fed like a dream. And then I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, I would like to have like some just in case, and it was like, okay. But then I was like, well, I need to have this good amount just in case. Yeah. It's like this thing, like, what if my milk dries up? And I was just like same thing. And then I did end up getting a little bit, and then I completely forgot about it because I didn't actually use it or need it. And then it wasn't until I was cleaning my freezer out like 6 months later, I found all these like packets of breast milk. And I was like, what a waste. Like and in my head at the time, I honestly thought, I was like, yeah, like I need all this just in case. And it was such a waste. I found it all and was like, yeah, liquid gold. Like what a waste.
100%. And I was the same. I remember throwing out breast milk that was like well over the expiry, been in the freezer, didn't use it. I actually ended up giving myself an oversupply because I was expressing
Yeah.
more than what my boobs thought I was feeding twins. So, you know, it wasn't necessary for me. And I learned that later on, with experience.
And that rolls on to my next question. So, will pumping like kind of affect your natural supply?
I have to go. Charlie's just woken up
It's
crying.
okay.
I'm just going to go stick his dummy in.
That's okay.
Sorry.
All good. All good.
All right. He's got his dummy. He's happy.
Is he going to go back to sleep, do you reckon?
I think he'll go back to sleep. See
Yeah.
how we go.
Do you want to just
He
give him
started rolling. So,
Oh,
he just wants to do that. And, yeah, he gets on his tummy and then gets stuck. Yeah. Fun
oh,
times.
I hated that. Like, I honestly hated that with the kids. Like, I remember like with the the hands come out, so you can't stop swaddling them. And it's so annoying because they wake themselves up and then they knock their dummy out and then, yeah. It brings it all back.
I know.
If you want to give him another minute
Okay.
just before we start again, it's up to you. Like until
No, we'll just keep plugging
yeah.
along.
Do you want me to ask that question again? Just so
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So
I'm not sure how you want to do that.
that's all right. I'll
But
just
yeah, if you want to start the question again, and then
perfect.
we can go from there.
All
Yeah.
right, sounds good. So that kind of takes me to my next question. So I was always worried when I was pumping, that would it have any kind of effect on my natural supply of milk? So is that a thing? Like, will actually pumping affect your natural milk supply?
Yes and no. So, generally, in the short term, pumping does not tend to affect supply, so long that milk is removed regularly from the breasts
Okay.
at the times when your baby would normally feed. So, milk supply is largely dependent on adequate milk removal, or you might have heard of the principle of supply equals demand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the more milk that's removed, the more milk that is made. So, as long as you're getting adequate amounts of milk removed from the breast, whether it's from a pump or directly from breastfeeding, the breast will continue to make milk. So, that being said, no pump is as good as a baby pump,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, a baby feeding directly from the breast, it's nature's way of drawing as much milk from the breast as possible. So some mums who maybe exclusively express,
hmm
or they've been expressing for many, many weeks, they might find that over time they could have a slight reduction in their milk supply.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways which that can be addressed, if that was the case. But it is certainly something to keep in mind. So, while as long as you pump regularly, you're still going to get enough milk out.
Yeah.
But over a long period of time, it's not as effective as a baby feeding directly at the breast. So there could be the potential for a milk supply drop.
Yeah. It's just not as enjoyable either. I remember it's hard work, when you're kind of sat there and you're just like listening to that sound. And I'm not going to lie, like it gives me like, like nightmares, that sound like, like you just sat there looking at it and you just honestly, you feel just like you're like a cow being milked. And it's just like, oh, it's just, yeah. One of these things, it's not, it's so different when you're looking down at a baby feeding, but pumping is hard work. It is hard work. Like it really is.
It is. And, not only that, you've got all that added inconvenience of having to clean the parts, having to assemble the parts. Yeah. And, I sometimes suggest to mothers to like cover up the pump with a cloth or something and just look at pictures of your baby,
Yes.
because it doesn't help that letdown if you're just listening to that droning of the
Yep.
pump and you feel like you are a cow. You feel like you're a cow
Yep.
getting milked.
Yep.
And it's just not as enjoyable. Like, I think most mums would agree with you there.
Oh, so is that an actual thing? I remember someone told me that they're like, think of your baby or look at your baby or see a picture of, smell something of your baby and it will help with your milk supply. Is that I thought it was an old wives' tale. Is that an actual fact?
It is, because it helps to encourage the letdown reflex. So the letdown reflex is basically what allows your milk to become available to your baby. So you need the right hormones to switch on, and babies do that naturally. When you're looking at your baby, it releases oxytocin, that feel good hormone, to help the letdown reflex occur. Um, and also, if you're not relaxed and if a pump naturally just makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
that can absolutely inhibit that letdown reflex. So therefore, less milk is going to become available. Yeah.
Yes, that's so true. So this was the next question was my question because it's something I remember I asked like 10 different people. So like I said, I didn't pump with my first, and with my second, I was like, no, I want to pump, because like for all these different reasons. But I was like, right, how do I go about starting? As in like when do I pump? Like, how do I get it's easy once you've got like say a milk there to kind of supplement a feed, because then you're like, okay, well, there's a bottle of milk there. So I'll pump then while, hubby's given the bottle. But like, when can you start? Like, when's it best to pump? Like after a feed or instead of a feed? Like, how do we go about that?
Mm. It would really depend on your situation.
Okay.
So there's many different situations where you might need to pump and reasons why. So then there can be better times to do that. So, like, I'll give you some examples.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a mum that's trying to increase milk supply, um, what's recommended is that you would pump after a feed. So you would offer your baby the breast
Mm-hmm.
first, and then let them take as much as they can or as much as they like. And then you would follow on from that feed with pumping,
Mm-hmm.
and then feeding your baby that express milk or offering that to them right away. And that's what we would call like topping them up with expressed milk.
Okay.
So the reason why that's recommended is because pumping directly after a feed then sends more messages to the mother's brain to say, hey, we need to make more milk.
Yeah.
And then that will then stimulate, that increase in milk making. Um, on the other hand, um, you may want to consider pumping before a breastfeed
Okay.
if you have an overactive letdown. So what that is where, that letdown reflex is so strong that the milk literally just shoots out.
Yeah, I remember
And
that well. That happened with me. Like drowns the
yeah, sometimes
child.
it's fly across the room.
Yeah. I remember the girls like drowning in this milk, and I'm like, sorry.
So yeah, the babies, they struggle to cope. So they might cough or choke or splatter. They might slide off the breast because there's just so much milk coming out that they can't stay attached. Um, so that's when a mother might want to consider expressing some milk beforehand. And that amount would literally just be a small amount,
Mm-hmm.
just until that initial letdown reflex has passed.
Yeah.
And then the baby can attach on nice and comfortably without, choking on milk. Um, and then, of course, pumping instead of a feed. So that would be more likely in your situations of where, you're separated from the baby,
Yeah.
you're at work, so you would need to pump while you're away to try and maintain your milk supply. Um, that's an example there. Yeah.
So, are there any downsides to pumping, or like kind of considerations when using a pump?
Yeah, definitely. um, I think this is me personally. Some of my downsides of using a pump was definitely the inconvenience of having to stop,
Mm-hmm.
set it up. Um, you know, you, you can sort of, it depends on what pump you use, but a lot of pumps you actually have to sit still. You might be attached to a power point, so you can't move around and just continue on your day. Um, you've also got to consider having access to clean water so you can rinse your pump parts afterwards. And also like a private space. So like if you're at work and you don't have a private office, I was lucky that I did, but some women don't. I've heard stories of women having to pump in toilets and bathrooms, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story. Don't get me started there. A lot needs to change in that regard for
Yeah,
supporting women in the
100%.
workplace, but
Yeah.
all these other considerations on top of, what we already have to deal with as mums and out and about working. So that can be really challenging. Um, and then, of course, in regards to using the pump itself, it's important to make sure that you do have the right size and the right fit. So pump parts usually will actually come with different flange sizes. Most pumps, when you buy one, you'll be given one, and then if you need a different size, you'll have to go and purchase that.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason for that is because if you have a flange that's too small, it could actually rub on your nipple and cause nipple trauma. Um, or on the other hand, yeah, I mean, if your flange is too large, it's not going to be effective in removing milk. So,
Yeah.
they can be things to consider.
I literally just thought you could go in and just buy the pump, like buy the breast pump, and then that's it. And it's like, oh, that's great. And like, because that's the thing I think you see on social media, these women just walk around these pumps around, and I'm like, oh, okay. But then also I think as well, for me, a downside when I was pumping was when you've got two kids, like when it's your second, you kind of already feel like, it's just taking you away more from like the toddler as well. Like you've fed your baby, and then I was like, right, I need to collect some more milk. And then you're just more like, okay, sorry, I'll be with you in like 10 more minutes. It's just another thing, isn't it? Sometimes like it's just, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And mothers who you might have heard of the term like triple feed. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what I was talking about before. Like these mums are offering baby the breast. They then, to try and increase supply, they then have to try and pump, which, is a whole thing in itself. And
Yeah.
then you've got to try and feed the baby the milk. So your feeding time, that takes so much time.
And especially
And
if
you've got
baby's
to you've
feeding
got to repeat this
frequently.
process every couple of hours.
Yeah.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
So um, it can be really, really challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My God. Yeah. Like I said, it's hard. It's like it's a job. It's a job. Like,
Mm.
so once you've collected the milk, what's the good way of like collecting it and storing it?
Yeah, I mean, there's different options there in terms of milk collection. So the ones that I kind of use the most in the past are like the small little bags. So they're like the small sterile bags.
Mm-hmm.
They've got it's kind of the Ziploc or how would you describe it? Like the sticky strip at the top that
Yeah.
you can seal.
Yeah.
And then you can literally just whack that in the freezer.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't recommend using like normal freezer bags that you would just buy at Coles and Woolies because they can puncture, and that will spoil your milk, which would be very, very sad.
Yeah.
Um, Other options that some mothers might try would be using actual feeding bottles
Mm-hmm.
that are made of glass or the hard BPA with a sealed lid. So you don't want to just put like the teat on top and then stick it in the fridge because obviously there's holes in there.
Yeah.
But you can get the bottles that will just have the lid that you can seal on top. And then when you're ready, you can take that off and then put your teat on top to feed the baby.
Oh, okay.
Other options, are like using baby food jars or like glass containers, or you can even buy like the special little milk trays, and they can be covered and stored away in the freezer. Um, when it comes to like storage,
Mm.
there are some really important things to think about for safety. So generally, once you've expressed milk, you can store that for up to 72 hours in the fridge before needing to use it or to get rid of it. Um, you can leave it in the fridge for a day or so and then freeze it if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
or you can freeze it straight away. So when your milk is frozen, you can then thaw it out later. Um, small amounts of breast milk can be expressed and pulled. So, if you're the mum that might be expressing just a little bit to try and slowly build up, an extra supply, um, you can do small amounts and then pull it together. But you need to make sure that the milk that you're adding is already chilled or cold. So, or vice versa.
Yeah, you wouldn't
So
have cold
an
milk in the
example would be
fridge and then
if I
putting
wanted
your,
to express a little bit, put it in a container, then put it in the fridge because
yeah,
remember your breast milk's warm. You don't want to be adding warm milk to cold milk that's in the
yes,
fridge.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So generally, once you've frozen your milk can stay in a deep freeze for 6 to 12 months. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, yeah. And if you're just having it like in your freezer section of a fridge,
Mm-hmm.
um, you can do that for up to 3 months. So it can last quite a while, but don't be like me and forget about it and then be disappointed, 2 years down the track that you didn't use all this breast milk.
Oh, I know. I actually
Just make
didn't know
milk
you could have
baths.
it. I actually didn't know you could keep it in the fridge for 72 hours. Like I thought it'd be more like
Mm.
24 hours. So that's pretty good. Like before, yeah.
Absolutely. And in fact, this one also surprised me when I was learning about milk expression. You can actually leave freshly expressed milk at room temperature for 6 to 8 hours.
Wow.
So if you are out and about and you're stuck without access to a fridge, as long as the temp's no more than 26 degrees, you can actually store your milk at room temp for 6 to 8 hours safely.
Honestly, I reckon that's something so many mums have no idea. And it's probably something that they would love to hear that, like probably not for us in the summer in Australia. Like it's no good for us in the heat wave at the minute. But, for most people around the world, that'd be so good. So I remember when I obviously formula feeding Maisie, but because she was breastfed for the first like couple of months and then she was formula fed. And because obviously she kind of had milk straight from the boob. So when she went on the bottle, she had to have it like a really warm bottle of formula. Whereas some of my friends who never breastfed, they just gave them like room temperature milk, and they always had this room temperature cold formula. And I was like, oh my God. But I used to joke because she got it straight from the source. So she was used to this warm milk coming out and then, yeah, ruined it then later on. So,
Absolutely.
so had reheating milk. I was like, that's, you hear like everyone says something different. Obviously you hear about don't it's I suppose same with the like formula, don't put it in the microwave, but like what's the safest way to heat it?
Mm. Um, okay. Definitely not in the microwave, like you said. Because it heats unevenly, it could burn your baby's mouth. And it can actually damage the components in breast milk. So if you're nuking your beautiful breast milk that's got all this amazing nutrients in it, well, what's the point?
Yeah, you've gone to all that
Um,
effort,
if we're talking about like frozen breast milk, you can either thaw it quickly or slowly. So think about if you were thawing chicken from the freezer, right? It's probably best to do it slowly. So you'd pop it in the
Mm-hmm.
fridge for several hours. You wouldn't just leave it to thaw at room temp.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it's the safest way. So yeah, it's the same with breast milk. So leave it in the fridge for a few hours or overnight. Um, if you have to get it thawed very quickly, then what you would do is take your milk straight out of the freezer, you'd put it into a bowl of warm water, and then as that water cools, you would then add a little bit of hot water to the bowl and just keep swirling around your container of breast milk
Mm-hmm.
until it becomes liquid. So you don't want to put it into boiling water,
I was
but you
just
just
gonna
put it
ask
into
that.
warm water
Yeah.
and do it very slowly that way. Yeah. Um, if you want to warm up like chilled or thawed breast
Mm-hmm.
milk, you can put it into a bottle warmer if you want to, and just do like a little test by dropping it onto your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you don't even have to warm it, like you were saying. A lot of babies are just happy to drink breast milk
Yeah.
cold,
Yeah. Well
rather
done,
than
those
body temp.
mums,
And
those lucky mums.
yeah, my first daughter did. Yeah, she would have
Oh,
her breast milk at daycare, cold, straight out of a sippy cup, and that was the
I,
only way I could get her to take it.
I remember that
And the
she would have a
educators were
bottle.
trying to
Yeah.
heat it up, and she'd refuse. Go figure.
That's, I mean, every kid's different as well. Sometimes you just got to do whatever works for you.
Yeah, 100%.
So breast pumps, there are so many of them out there, like so many. Are there any that, I suppose for mums who are looking at buying either pregnant or wanting to start pumping, is there any that you would actually recommend as like a professional and a mum of two?
Um, I guess it would come down to the type of pump, not necessarily brands. So the type of pump that you would want to use would depend on why you're using it and how much you need to use it. So I'll elaborate. If we talk about like electric breast pumps,
Mm-hmm.
um, they can be in the form of like a large hospital grade pump, a medium sized pump, or even a small battery operated pump. Hospital grade pumps are like kind of the top of the tier, I guess, if you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about breast pumps. So they're the double electric pumps. They're generally recommended if a woman is needing to like exclusively express,
Mm-hmm.
or if they're trying to initiate lactation. An example might be is if a baby's sick and unable to breastfeed, or they're premature, um, or if a mum's even returning to work on a full-time capacity and needs to pump at regular intervals throughout the day. Um, when I went to work, I had a personal electric pump. So that's one of the smaller and medium-sized pumps, so not a hospital grade one.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like brands like Medela, Spectra, you might have heard of. They're more suited to mothers who are expressing less often
Mm-hmm.
or only on occasions, just to have a bit of milk at hand. Um, and then there's other types of breast pumps, and they're manual breast pumps. So they basically have like a little lever or a piston to cause suction. So the mum would manually pump, and they can control the strength of the suction,
Oh, okay.
depending
Yeah.
on how it feels, or if they have any nipple damage or pain. Now, they have some pros because they're compact, they're cheaper, they're easy to carry, like you can just whack it in your handbag.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just not as effective as
Yeah.
electric pumps. So they're only just, I suppose, if you'd need to have one for the occasional
Yeah. You're not,
pump.
yeah.
If you're wondering, right, like, should I even buy a pump? If you say you are pregnant, just maybe wait and see if you actually need it first. They are expensive, and there are options where you can hire them. So, um, you know, the Australian Breastfeeding Association hires out breast pumps. You can actually hire them from the hospitals or a pharmacy. So they are options there if you don't want to just lash out and buy a pump, even though you may not necessarily need it.
Yeah. What about the kind of the stick-on ones? That's kind of like the hacker and all those kind of ones, because that would technically come under the pumps, wouldn't it?
Mm. Yeah, so the hacker is actually like a passive sort of collection that happens. Like, so the hacker you would suction on, for example, on the opposite breast when you're feeding,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that would kind of catch all of the letdown that might come out and just try and stimulate a little bit more milk to come out of the opposite breast.
Yeah.
Um, I definitely did use a hacker early on with my daughter because I thought I had to to catch milk, and I ended up using a cup that I would just place in my bra, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just a little milk collection cup, and that would catch letdown as well. So I could just save a bit of that if I wanted to, rather
Yeah.
than it all just getting soaked up into a breast pad. Um, but yeah, Hucker's one of them. There's also a bit of a trend at the moment with battery operated pumps.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have seen some videos on social media of mums just popping these little battery operated ones into their bra and then just like going around
Oh,
the
I
house
have
and doing their
actually.
usual thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're becoming more popular. And as to their effectiveness, I really I couldn't comment.
Yeah.
I've heard mixed stories. Some mums say they're amazing and others say they're useless. So
Yeah.
I guess it would just come down to lots of different personal situations and whether that
Yeah.
would work for you or not. Yeah.
Because I remember what got me with that, I did the hacker because I was the same. I used to have a huge letdown. So I'd start on one breast and the other one would just leak and leak and leak. So I was like, all right. So I got given this hacker and I was like, I'll put that on to collect the milk. But obviously it was kind of like suctioning as well. And then I ended up with a really good supply then because it was obviously stimulating, because it was still kind of like pulling, obviously it was like, stimulating. It wasn't just catching it. It was because it had a little bit of a suction, but that's all I needed to get this really, really good supply. So then I ended up just having to get the little milk cups to catch them because it was just doing too much then. So, but it's crazy how just that little bit of a suction where, like you said, it's a passive thing. You don't really feel like it's doing anything, but it was obviously like it was stimulating it a lot.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the pumping, what are the best pumps, nipple confusion. That's one that like it's kind of said from day one, even with dummies and bottles. But so a mum who's like exclusively breastfeeding and they want to express and, offer baby a bottle and they start to get worried that they're going to get this nipple confusion, then refuse the nipple pretty much. Is that an actual thing or is that an old wives' tale as well?
No, it's 100% a thing. Yeah. So bottle feeding can certainly have some disadvantages. It involves the use of an artificial teat, and research has actually shown that that can be associated with a decreased duration of breastfeeding, especially in the early weeks and months while you're trying to establish breastfeeding. And it's also, there's evidence that using artificial teats may impact the baby's ability to demonstrate an effective sucking action at the breast.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've got a young baby who's still learning how to attach and feed, um, you may like to avoid using a bottle to feed express milk because that sucking action of the bottle and the breast are different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a learning experience, not only for the mum but for the baby. Your baby needs to learn how to attach well and suck at the breast, not necessarily learn how to suck from a bottle, unless that's their only option. So if you want the baby to be on your breast, they need to have as much opportunity as possible. And I could be wrong in quoting this, but I believe the current recommendations are if you're wanting to breastfeed, to try and avoid the introduction of artificial teats or dummies in the first 6 weeks of a baby being born. And I think, again, it just comes down to that. You're trying to establish breastfeeding. So
Mm-hmm.
that'll give you the best opportunity if you can avoid using those things. Now, in saying that, well, what do you do, right? If you have to express, like,
Yeah.
how do you feed your newborn baby the milk? So
Yeah.
you can give a newborn baby a spoon, or you can give them breast milk through a syringe. Babies as well, even young babies, can actually lap up milk from a small cup. So
What, a
um,
cup?
there are options of trying to avoid nipple confusion or,
Yeah.
babies preferring the bottle. If that doesn't work and you do want to use the bottle, that's also completely fine. You may just want to consider what's considered paced feeding, and that's virtually where um, you would only allow the baby to have small amounts of milk at a time. So
Mm-hmm.
um, and using like a slow flow teat. So basically, the baby has to really work on getting that suck to
Yeah.
draw the milk out of the teat rather than it all just pulling in their mouth and they get a bit lazy.
We did that. We had to use a baby teat even when she was a bit older when we went on the bottle because like I found the same thing when I was obviously giving bottle and breast and same thing. I had to make sure I had a slow teat because like they remember they said that to me. They're like they're just going to be lazy. And I remember we used to call my first lazy Maisie because she would just lay there with like the nipple in her mouth and was like, oh, this is too hard. Just squirt it in, and we'd have to like we literally had to syringe it into her mouth because lazy Maisie wouldn't suck on the nipple, so we had to syringe it in. And I was like, I'm not doing this for the, like, come on, you need to learn how to suck. And so then I was like, yeah, with my second, I was like, right, we're not getting into that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And you can imagine like a baby, all this milk's just flying into their mouth and they're like, well, why would I have to work hard to get it from the breast?
yeah,
I'll just take the bottle, thanks.
yeah.
So you can see how that happens. It absolutely is a thing.
And they get frustrated then on the boob. And I remember seeing her and she was just getting annoyed. It was like, wait, come on, like, I can't get it. And I was like, come on, like, you need to suck harder. I know you can get it, but oh, it's so funny. Like,
Really challenging. I could have imagined that would have been so hard.
so that lazy Maisie straight away, all the midwives are calling it that as well. Like, she wasn't even like 12 hours old. I was like, yep, you've earned this. You've got this. So, you've collected enough milk. So for me, I was like, I really wanted to have enough milk so then I could go and maybe have a glass of wine with a friend or go for dinner or just leave the house for an hour or two, so then like Mark could have feed the kids. So a lot of people ask, like, if a partner feeds the baby, would I still then pump when I'm out?
Yeah. Um, I guess it would depend on how long you're away for.
Mm-hmm.
It is a really common question about, how do I manage pumping when I'm not going to be around the baby? Should I
Mm-hmm.
replace that feed with pumping? And generally, it comes back to that principle of supply equals demand. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I was saying before, for the breast to continue to make milk, you need to remove milk often. If you give expressed milk or non-human milk supplements to
Mm-hmm.
someone else to give your baby at their next feed, you will then need to pump again to replace that missed feed.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you go long stretches without removing milk from the breasts, it will lead to a gradual decline in milk supply,
Mm-hmm.
as well as increase that likelihood of like developing inflammatory breast conditions like mastitis.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about it, like your breast might be used to feeding a baby every 2 to 3 hours, then all of a
Yeah.
sudden mum's gone out, for dinner with friends and her breasts aren't emptied again for another 5 or 6 hours, then,
Yeah.
she could become engorged, uncomfortable, her breast might be getting inflamed. So there are things to consider there. Um, Another common scenario that I always get asked about, and particularly from pregnant mums or new mums, is can I express milk before going to bed and then leave the express milk with my partner so they can feed the baby overnight and I can
Yeah.
get some sleep?
Yeah.
While that sounds really beautiful and amazing, and I would love to do that, it's not necessarily the best thing to do. And the reason why is because you're missing feeds
Mm-hmm.
overnight. And if you did that consistently, you are going to get a gradual decline in your milk supply.
Yeah.
Um, so in order to maintain the supply, you would still probably need to wake up and pump to remove the milk from your breasts.
Yeah.
Um, so to me, there would be no point for me sitting there with the pump while my husband was feeding the baby with a
Yeah.
bottle at the same time because I'm
Yeah.
still waking up and I'm still having to express.
Yeah.
So it was just easier to wake up, put the baby straight on the boob,
Yeah.
go back to sleep. So that's just something else to consider. Knowing what we know about how breasts make milk and supply equals demand, you still have to be expressing regularly
Yeah.
if you want to keep up your supply.
Because we were the same. I remember Mark was like, I would love to do a feed, overnight. And I was like, okay, but because I was breastfeeding, I was like, well, how's that going to work? So then I worked out and I was like, well, if you feed her in the night, then, I'm going to miss that feed because I'm not going to go all night without feeding. Same thing. So I was like, well, I'm not going to get up and pump. And then also like he works away for a week. So then I was like, what, like then the next, it's just going to mess it up. And I'm like, it's so much easier for me to just put her on the boob when you're not here, than there's pumping. And it was just, like I said, it was just another hardship to do. And then having to clean the pump in the night. And I was like, oh no. So, whereas it worked for my friend, I remember she had like really bad nipples, like her nipples were torn up. So she was in the night feed, like I said, like she was pumping just like you did, but hers was more of like a break, but then her husband was feeding at the same time. So it worked in that sense, but it wasn't something she kept going because it was just that's unattainable all night. Like that's a hard one to do.
Absolutely, it isn't sustainable on a long period of time. If you did want to try that scenario out, um, you may be able to pump some milk before bed, um, and then dream feed your baby, and then you might be able to get a bit of another stretch of sleep. And if the baby did wake, they might be able to feed from the bottle. But yeah, you'd probably still need to wake up, within a reasonable time frame to express or feed your baby anyway.
Yeah.
It's just the reality. Babies feed overnight. They always have done and they always will. So we have to try and figure out ways that'll work.
And they don't feed forever. Like, promise you, my girls are 2 and 4 now. And yeah, they don't feed forever. I promise mums who are listening.
That's right. It's something I wish I would have heard when I was up at all hours of the night with my first baby thinking, what have I done? Is this ever going to end? I'm never going to sleep again.
And you think you're the only one up there feeding all night. And then you're like, and then the more people who talk to you, you're like, oh, actually, my night wasn't that bad. Like,
Yeah.
so is there a best time of the day to pump? When your milk is probably at the highest, like say you're only going to pump once a day because you want to get this bit of a stash or enough to kind of make a bit of a bottle. Is there a best time of the day for your body?
Most mums will have a more abundant milk supply first thing in the morning. Interestingly, about breast milk, the composition can actually change throughout the day and at different times of the day and in between feeds. So if you're looking to increase, or well, I guess maximize the quantity, first thing in the morning can be better than at night.
Yeah.
If you were trying to maximize fat content, you might be better doing that at night.
Okay.
Because early in a feed, your baby gets breast milk that is lower in fat. Towards the end of a feed, they will receive breast milk that is higher in fat. So the emptier your breast is, the higher the fat content will be in the milk, and vice versa. So in the early part of the day, if you have very full breasts, you'll probably produce a lot of milk, but the fat content will be lower.
Oh.
Later in the day, as your breasts soften and the quantity reduces, your fat content will be higher. So it can depend on what you're trying to achieve. But generally, most women, if they want to pump, they want to get as much milk as they can.
Yeah.
First thing in the morning is best.
Okay.
Another little thing related to that would be whether giving the milk that you've pumped at night is okay to feed your baby during the day.
I was literally just going to ask that. So, that's an old wives' tale I've heard, that it's like you have to put the time on and give them the morning milk for the morning milk and the night milk for the night milk, I didn't know if it was an old wives' tale about the hormones in the milk. Is that an actual thing or?
There's more research that needs to be done into that. So basically, we know that breast milk can change in composition at different times of the day. So day milk can be different to night milk, and vice versa. And it has a lot to do with the circadian rhythms. But there is no evidence to suggest that breast milk expressed in the day or the night can cause any issues if you feed it, at different times of the day. So we still need to do a lot more research, obviously, into that. And it is quite complex. But yeah, as of now, we know that it's okay to feed the baby milk. If you'd expressed it at night, you can feed it during the day and vice versa.
I think it's probably for the mums that are like, oh, I need to feed my baby overnight and I've only got day milk, and they might be stressing like, my baby's going to be up all day. Like that's the kind of things you think about as a mum, like, when you're trying to get the exact same the right method to get them to sleep because they slept the night before. So you're going to get the right pajamas. You've got to get the right sleep sound at the right temperature and everything.
Make sure the algorithm is all correct so you can replicate.
And it doesn't happen again for 2 weeks.
No, they change every day, don't they?
Every day. And then you have another kid and they're so different to the first and you're like, oh, God.
Just when you think you've nailed it.
Oh, I tell you, those second kids. So, is it normal as well to not get as much milk when you're pumping as breastfeeding? Because I remember when I was pumping, I remember looking and I was like, how am I even feeding my child? I was like, I barely got anything, and I had a really, really good supply. Because I remember I used to see it all pouring out, and I had nice little chunky kids. So I had a good supply, but pumping wise, I could barely get anything. Like, is that normal?
Mm, yes and no. So, like we were saying before, no pump will ever be as effective as a baby at
Okay.
removing milk.
Yeah.
Some pumps can come pretty close, like those double electric hospital grade pumps. If you've pumped straight after you've breastfed your baby,
Mm-hmm.
well, it would be normal to only get a tiny amount of milk, because most of the milk that you've had available for that feed has already been removed and fed to your baby.
Yeah.
So if you're only getting, like 10, 15 mils, don't stress because your baby's already taken a lot of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, if a mum's exclusively pumping, then you would expect larger quantities. So,
Okay.
like we spoke about, you might expect more in the early hours of the day
Mm-hmm.
compared to like later at night.
Yeah.
You'd expect it to ebb and flow throughout the day, and you would want to be seeing some larger quantities of milk if you were only
Okay. Yeah.
pumping. If pumping was consistently producing small amounts, then you may need to look at potential issues. So there could be a case of low milk supply.
Mm-hmm.
The pump parts might not be the right fit, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
Um, or, like we also mentioned, the mum's having a hard time getting that letdown reflex to happen.
Yeah.
So, like I mentioned, the letdown reflex is really important. It's what releases milk from the nipple. So as soon as your baby starts sucking or the pump starts working, it sends those messages to the brain to then release oxytocin to
Mm-hmm.
allow breast milk to flow. So if you're stressed, you're anxious, you're experiencing pain, or you're tense, that letdown reflex can actually be inhibited and you're not going to get much milk flowing out into your pump. Um, there are ways that you can try and encourage that letdown reflex, which we've sort of briefly touched on.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure you are relaxed. You can try covering up the pump with a blanket, look at your baby, or if you're away from your baby, you could look at images. Um, Other things you could try would be like to gently massage your breasts by stroking down towards the nipple. Um, just using the flat end of your hand or your finger. You don't want to try and
Yeah.
put a hole in your breast. Just very gentle massage is important. But just that touching can help to trigger more of a letdown reflex. Warmth also works really well. So some mums
Okay.
might get more milk after they've had a shower because that can help trigger the letdown reflex. Um, yeah, and just trying to relax, thinking about
Which,
putting your feet
yeah.
up,
Which
have a
is hard,
cuppa,
hard when you're a
think
mum,
happy thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'd be the main things to think about.
Yeah. And the last one I wanted to ask you was like cleaning the pump. So
Mm.
do mums have to sterilize it after every time they've used the parts?
No, which is nice.
That's good, yeah.
So, um, you don't have to disinfect or sterilize your pump parts
Yeah.
as long as your baby is full term and healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and after they've left the hospital. You just need to make sure that you are cleaning your parts thoroughly.
Yeah.
So, what thorough cleaning means is like, making sure your hands have been washed with warm soapy water, making sure you're drying them on a clean cloth or a towel.
Yeah.
Um, with your parts after you've expressed, take it all apart, rinse it in cold water to just get all the excess milk off.
Yeah.
Um, and then if you want to use it later, like if you need to pump again in a couple of hours, you can actually, after you've done that little rinse, you can pop it in a clean container and put it in the fridge
Okay.
and then take it out and use it again straight
Without
away.
cleaning it properly,
Um,
just a
mm,
quick rinse.
mhm,
Yeah. Okay.
mm. But you do want to. like at least at the end of the day, make sure you give it a really good hot soapy wash.
Yeah.
Using like dishwashing liquid. Rinse it at least twice in hot water after you've
Yeah.
done that to get all the residue off. And just air dry it upside down on a clean paper towel is usually suffice. And then when you have dried it, make sure you put it in a clean container so nothing else can come into contact with it. So yeah, in a nutshell, you don't have to sterilize it. You don't need a sterilizer. You can have one if you want, but it's not absolutely necessary. Yeah, and if you're going to pump several times a day, you can just rinse your containers in cold water, or you can even put them unrinsed into a clean container and in the fridge. So
Wow.
that's a nice little handy tip.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like, you're already going to all that effort with the pumping, and it's such a faff. And then I was thinking that I was like, would I have to sterilize, especially if you are pumping, like mums who are exclusively pumping every 2 hours? Like, geez, it's not hard. It's hard enough to look after a baby, and then that on top of it's a lot. Like, and it's a lot to stress you out when you're already stressed. And
Mm, it can also help too, like with things about like storage of milk and how long you have it here and how long
yeah,
you can use it for and all that sort of stuff. Just stick something on your fridge, or you can actually, there's some really good resources out there that they have them in like little tables. And, you know, mums are sleep deprived. And like you said, it's stressful. There's
yeah,
so much to think about. You're not going to remember like how many hours can I keep the milk in the fridge for again, and just
100%.
put something
Yeah,
on the fridge and you can refer to it at any time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, everyone's sleep deprived. And then you're like, especially new mums, it's also new when you're trying to look after this baby and then trying to think about all these things. And so I actually love that idea. Like I said, stick it on the fridge and just make it so easy for a mum to read when they've had no sleep. And so is there anywhere that mums can go to kind of get this information? Like they can go and follow this up and have a look themselves, and especially in Australia.
Mm. If you're looking for online resources, the
Mm-hmm.
Australian Breastfeeding Association are fabulous. So they have a really comprehensive website that you can just pop on and even just type in the search box what you're looking for, and you'll
Yeah.
see a heap amount of articles. There's booklets you can purchase on pumping
Yeah.
and how to manage that. And they do have resources that you can just stick on the fridge, like I was referring to. Alternatively, you can speak to your child health nurse or lactation consultant,
Yeah.
or your healthcare provider, like your GP. They may have some resources that you could access as well.
Because it's a whole thing. Like, honestly, I didn't realize until I actually was breastfeeding about the pumping. Like, I didn't even think when I was even pregnant. Like, I was like, oh, I never bought a breast pump because I was like, oh, like, I was like, I'll see how I go. But that's the thing. It's such a big thing, and it's quite daunting as well for people who want to start and they don't want to kind of disrupt any of their milk, and they want to keep the process as natural as possible. So, so thank you so much for coming on, Leah. And yeah, you've been this oracle of wisdom. So I wish I had you when I was figuring out the pumping with my first, and I was getting like different advice from everyone. Everyone was saying something different, and it was just, I just wanted someone to sit down and listen and be like, right, tell me exactly what I need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And I could talk about this all day. I love talking about breastfeeding and everything in between. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Real Mummy podcast. Remember, every mum's journey is unique and you are doing an amazing job. Please be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss out on new episodes released every week. Head over to our website at www.realmummypodcast.com to stay up to date with the latest episodes and dive into our recent blog articles filled with even more mum wisdom and stories. We absolutely love connecting with our listeners, so don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Real Mummy Podcast. Join the conversation, share your thoughts, and become part of our supportive mum community. And I'd love to hear from you. Got a topic you want covered? Know a guest you'd love to hear more from? Reach out to us through our website or social media. Your input is invaluable and helps us create the content that matters to you. Thank you for being part of the Real Mummy podcast family. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind to yourself, and remember, you're never alone on this journey. You've got this.